was not a man at all. He was a widow called Hannah Snell. Hannah admitted having shared a room and a bed with dozens of male comrades in arms without once being discovered. During her military career, which had lasted for more than 5 years, she had been wounded several times and flogged for various misdemeanours. It seems hard to credit, but despite all this and more, her identity as a woman was never even suspected. It was only after she had retired with a war pension that her secret was finally disclosed, and she was the one who disclosed it. But her years of deception paid off, because she had a second career as a theatrical performer. She danced and sang for many years at London's Sadler's Wells Theatre, where she was the star attraction, dressed in full military regalia. But her story starts in Worcester, where she was born in 1723. By the age of 23, she was married to a Dutch seaman. It was a big mistake, and within a year he had deserted her. But Hannah was not one to take desertion lying down. She wanted to catch up with her errant husband, and decided the best way to do it was to join the Navy herself. She borrowed her cousin's clothes and his name and enlisted in 1745 in Guise's regiment of foot. Hannah was signed on without question, simply because at that time no one would have dreamed that a woman would even consider doing such a thing. Within months, and following a flogging for insubordination, Hannah deserted the army and joined the Navy instead. She signed up at Portsmouth. Clearly a bit of a rebel, she was quickly in trouble and flogged again, but she stayed at sea and by all accounts proved a remarkably brave fighter. She was involved in hand-to-hand fighting during one skirmish just outside Madras in India. She dug trenches and latrines, waded through rivers, and was wounded more than a dozen times. Sometime later, no one is sure exactly when, she sailed for Lisbon, where she heard news that her husband had been executed. She refused to leave the Navy until her 5 years were up and she could claim her pension, which is exactly what she did. When she finally returned to London with her money, she had her story printed and became the talk of the town. The Duke of Cumberland was so impressed, he put her name on the King's list, a list of pensioners, to receive £30 a year. She eventually married again and opened a pub in Wapping called the Female Warrior, but for reasons that have never been explained, she ended her days in the Bethlehem Hospital for the insane. She died there in 1792. Let's see. This is a very short one. Highland soil in Westminster, 1716. The British are notoriously eccentric, and as a general rule it is probably pretty safe to say that the richer the individual, the greater the eccentricity. One of the most eccentric London residents of all time has to be the 18th century Earl of Fife, a staunch Jacobite who hated the repression of the Scots that followed their defeat at Culloden in 1745. He was determined to get the better of the English whenever he could. But the Earl was in a tricky position. From 1760 on, Visitors often think the Georgian planners who built these little shops were simply building to make a profit. In fact, they built the arcade to cover a narrow alley that ran alongside Burlington House, now the home of the Royal Academy, but in the early 19th century still a private home. The owner of Burlington House was Lord George Cavendish, who had complained for years that while sitting in his garden he was constantly hit on the head by oyster shells, apple cores, old bottles, and even an occasional dead cat. These unpleasant items were thrown over the wall between the garden and the lane which then existed at its side. Cavendish decided that a row of shops would put paid to the nuisance, and so he had them built, and the alleyway vanished forever. Samuel Ware was asked to design the beautiful shop fronts, which exist largely unchanged today, and though the shop interiors are tiny, the shopkeepers have always sold luxury goods. So, what they lack in quantity of stock, they more than make up for in quality. Originally, the arcade was a single story, but an upper level was added in 1906, and above the shops, the rooms were let. According to one wag, they were let to the better sort of courtesan. The beautiful triple arch entrance was destroyed for no good reason in 1931, and the new design was much hated. There was also some damage during the war, but the arcade remains one of the world's first shopping malls. Instead of security men, it still has a beadle who will ask you to leave the arcade if he catches you whistling, singing or humming. Pimps used to whistle to their prostitutes as a warning that the police were nearby, running or carrying an open umbrella. The greatest legal scandal of all, 1819. The law has always been something of a scandalous institution. Lawyers have the best trade union in the sense that entry to the profession is strictly controlled, and because lawyers never undercut each other, and there is no genuine competition between practitioners, the poor public is always forced to pay very high prices for the advice it receives. But the scandal of lawyers' costs today, a disgrace that no government dares tackle, simply because politicians themselves tend to be drawn from the ranks of the legal profession, is nothing compared with the scandals of the past. One of the greatest and most extraordinary of all legal humiliations, a scandal that outranks every other London legal dishonour, was known as the Great Jennings case. Anyone who has read Charles Dickens' great novel of London to stand upright inside, but it is said that this tiny lockup had and still has a direct telephone link to Scotland Yard. Right up until the 1960s, the Trafalgar Square lockup was still in use, but it is by no means the only strange thing about this part of London. Take the famous lions at the bottom of Nelson's Column, for example. When the column was being built, an artist had to be found to design the 4 huge lions round the base of the column. They are so much bigger than life size that it was feared the final result would be embarrassingly out of proportion unless someone with the right talents was chosen to complete the work. Queen Victoria wanted Edwin Landseer, 1862 to 73, one of her favourite painters, to carry out the work, but Landseer was horrified at the suggestion. He was not a sculptor and had no useful experience to bring to bear. He refused the commission, but the Queen would not give up. After being approached by peers and MPs, Landseer finally agreed, but only on condition that he could take as long as he needed, and that a dead lion would be sent round to his studio so he could study it before putting pen to paper. It took several months before a lion died, presumably of natural causes, at London Zoo. It was immediately sent round to Landseer's house, where he kept it until it stank so badly the neighbours began to complain. It took more than a year of preparatory drawing and several more dead lions before Landseer was finally happy, and the result was the splendid lions we see today. But a century and more ago, nothing seemed quite so straightforward. The drawings were ready, but the sculpted lions were not installed until 25 years after they should have been put up. When Landseer died, wreaths were draped around the lions' necks as a mark of respect. Another curious tale concerns the Capitol at the top of the column on which Nelson's statue stands, and the bronze bas-reliefs at the bottom of the column, showing Nelson's victories, as well as his yet more famous death. All are made from French cannons, captured after the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. Right, let's try this one. The train disguised as a ship, 1836. The train was, to the 19th century, what the internet is to our century, the greatest scientific innovation of the age. It transformed Britain from a land of remote villages where people rarely travelled more than a few miles in all their lives, to a place where eventually even the relatively poor could afford to travel distances undreamed of by their parents and grandparents. The huge success of the very earliest railways in the north of England meant that trains quickly spread, and of course part of the spread took the iron roadway to London. The earliest London service of all was that which ran from the city to Greenwich. Crowds gathered in those early days to see the extraordinary new invention, a breathing monster that could pull huge loads without the assistance of horses. The new method of transport was very popular with the travelling public, or at least that part of it wealthy enough to indulge in what was seen as a luxury. But much as people admired the technology, there were many complaints about the aesthetics of the whole enterprise. The chief complaint was that somehow the engines were rather ugly. Letters were written in great numbers to the railway company, asking if they could not brighten up these dismal-looking locomotives. The real problem was that the first generation to experience railways judged them against the brightly coloured mail coaches. They studied the problem, and after some time, one of their engineers came up with a solution. Because the brick-built viaducts that carried the line into London looked rather like Roman aqueducts, an eccentric engineer at the L&GR suggested to Braithwaite and Milner, who made the company's engines, that they should build a locomotive in the style of a Roman galley. The result was that a year later huge crowds gathered at Cornhill in the city to watch the arrival of a long line of carriages pulled by a very passable imitation of an ancient ship. When word got out, much of the route was regularly lined with spectators, eager to see this extraordinary engine, which was, as its inventor had suggested, particularly impressive when viewed from the ground as it passed sedately over one or other of the company's viaducts. The only thing that spoiled the general effect was the noise and the clouds of dense smoke. Despite its initial popularity, the idea of locomotives imitating ships did not catch on, and the London and Greenwich soon reverted to more practical-looking engines. Trafalgar Square, permanently unfinished, 1838. Present-day Trafalgar Square is built on the site where Henry VIII and earlier kings once kept their birds of prey and their horses. The site was first built on when Chaucer was clerk of the King's Works in the 1380s, and Richard II needed somewhere close to the rambling palace of Whitehall for the royal hawks. Gradually, the word mews was used not just for hawks and falcons, but for other animals kept either for royal use or entertainment. The royal mews lasted well beyond the destruction by fire of the Palace of Westminster, but the area in which the mews stood gradually became a warren of small, dirty lanes where thieves and vagabonds abound. But by the time the area, by then known as the Bermudas, was cleared completely to allow for the building of the present square, the word mews had passed into the language and meant any narrow alleyway where horses were kept. Today in Belgravia and Mayfair, the narrow back lanes behind grand houses are still often called mews, for here the servants lived in small cottages or above the stables where their employers' horses were kept. Like most building projects in London, Trafalgar Square was the subject of endless disputes and arguments. The plans for the National Gallery, completed in 1838, were derided by many who thought the proposed building an architectural disaster. But unlike most projects, which are eventually built and completed, however greatly modified during the planning process, Trafalgar Square has never been completed and remains unfinished to this day. The unfinished bit is the empty plinth in the northwest corner. This has been empty ever since the square was first built, and though in recent years some bizarre sculptures have been placed on the unused plinth, including an upside-down see-through version of the plinth itself, there are still no plans to erect a permanent statue here. Why Big Ben isn't as to the huge bell on which the hours struck. All the statistics to do with St. Stephen's Tower, renamed the Elizabeth Tower to commemorate the Queen's Diamond Jubilee in 2012, as Big Ben is really known, and its great clock are astonishing. The tower is nearly 320 feet, or 98 metres high, and it took almost 19 years from laying the first foundation stone to getting the clock going, largely because no one could agree about who should make it. The job was first offered to Benjamin Fleamy, the Queen's clockmaker, who was based in Pall Mall. His design was attacked as absurd and incompetent by another clockmaker, J. Dent, and after a huge fight with letters banging to and fro, and Times leaders thundering out various opinions, the commissioners charged with organising the work gave in and launched a competition to design and build the new clock. The contract finally went to Dent amid much acrimony in 1852. 2 years later, the unique clock, 15.5 feet, or 4.7 metres long by nearly 5 feet, or 1.5 metres wide, was ready, but there was nowhere to put it because wrangles over the building of the tower had delayed construction. While all this was being sorted out, an East London company cast a great 16-ton bell, but during tests using a 1300 weight or 660 kilogram clapper, the bell cracked. It then had to be melted down and recast, this time by the Whitechapel Bell Foundry. It took 16 horses, the best part of a day, to haul the gigantic bell to Parliament Square. It was then hoisted into position at the top of the tower, which was completed just in time. When the clock began to run, it was discovered that the 2.5-ton hands were so heavy that the mechanism could not move them. They were redesigned in a lighter metal, but now crashed down past the 3 each time they reached 12. Remade for a third time in hollow copper, they worked and they have kept time accurately ever since. There are 2 theories about the origins of the name Big Ben. Around the time the clock was due to be completed, the prize fighter and publican Ben Gaunt went 60 rounds with the best bare-knuckle boxer in the country, Nat Langham. The bout was declared a draw, but it made both men national heroes. Ben Gaunt was a huge man, and one story has it that the Great Bell was named after him. The other story attributes the name to Benjamin Hall, the Chief Commissioner of Works, who was addressing the House on the subject of a name for the new bell tower, when, to great laughter, someone shouted, "Call it Big Ben." Perhaps the most remarkable thing about the clock is that even by the standards of today's atomic timepieces, it is wonderfully accurate. When the commissioners launched their competition to design it, they stipulated that it must be accurate to within 1 second an hour. Most clockmakers at the time agreed that this was impossible, but that's how accurate the clock still is today. If it does get slightly out of time, penny coins, used as necessary, kept especially for the purpose, are placed on the huge pendulum, and the weight of the coin or coins is enough to adjust the clock by a fraction of a second. Well, I hope you enjoyed those little strange stories all about London. I thought they were fun. This has been